Hi everyone, welcome to your lesson on population factors. This lesson is going to be the first lesson in your introduction to ecosystems. So getting into ecosystems, we need to talk about how ecosystems are organized. Ecosystems are very complex, interactive systems that include both biological, remember the prefix bio meaning life, and including biological or biotic and physical or abiotic. So physical and abiotic mean things that aren't living. So remember, whenever you have the prefix, the letter A is a prefix, it means not, and then not whatever the word is, and bio, so not living. Disruptions to any physical or biological component of an ecosystem can lead to shifts in all of its populations. So if there are biotic or abiotic, if there are changes in the abiotic or biotic components of that ecosystem, then the populations can change. So depending on what the changes are, the population numbers could go up, or most likely the population numbers go down. So it's a very, very delicate balance to have an ecosystem that the population is maintaining, and it's not sharply increasing or sharply decreasing. So ecosystems are organized in a certain way, hierarchical organization, sort of like the human body. So groups of the same organisms, which are species, form populations, and I'm going from smallest to biggest here. Just like when we learn about the human body, we start with cells, and then cells come together to make up tissues, and tissues make up organs, and organs make up organ systems, and so on. So here, groups of the same organisms, species, form populations. So when you have lots of the same species that come together, you've got populations. Populations form communities. Communities come together to form an ecosystem, and then all the ecosystems on Earth make up the biosphere, the living part of Earth. And like all individual organisms, ecosystems are sustained by the continuous flow of energy. So they are kept alive because there's a continuous energy. So this diagram is great. It's showing you the energy flow through the ecosystem. The red arrows are energy and the blue arrows are nutrients. So if you look at the very top left, you notice that it's the sun. The sun is responsible for all energy flow in ecosystems. So from the sun gives plants the energy that they need to undergo photosynthesis. So plants get the food they need, and producers, those are what plants are called, give out heat energy. Consumers give out heat energy. So the consumers eat the producers. And then you look at the blue, the nutrients. So it goes from producers to consumers, from consumers to decomposers, from decomposers over to the inorganic nutrient pool, and then up to producers again. And it can also go from producers to decomposers. So there's lots of different ways that energy flows through ecosystems is the bottom line. All right, so the meat of the lesson it starts with this slide. So populations and ecosystems. A population is a group of organisms belonging to the same species that live in a specific area. So population density is a measure of the number of individual organisms living in a defined place. So density, we talk about cold air, the difference in cold air and warm air. Cold air is heavier and more dense, so it means there's more air molecules packed into a sample. So when we talk about population density, there would be, in a highly dense area, there would be a lot of organisms living in that place. In a place that did not have high population density, had low population density, there would not be a lot of organisms. So populations are regulated by something called limiting factors. And there's four different things we're going to go over. There's density-dependent factors, density-independent, abiotic factors, and biotic factors. So, starting with the first, density-dependent factors. These are limiting factors that operate more strongly on large populations than on small ones. And so if you look at just the word density dependent, it means that we need a large number of organisms. It depends on a large density. So examples of this are competition. So a density dependent factor would be competition. You're not going to have competition among organisms if there are many of them. So you would only have competition among a species or a population if there are lots of something in it. So competition, they might compete for food, water, shelter, space. Predation, so when things eat other things, that is going to depend on density. Parasitism, so parasites and disease, the bigger the population, the bigger the density, the more you're going to have of parasites and disease. So these limiting factors are triggered by increases in population density, and that's known as crowding. All right, density independent factors. These are things that can happen to a population regardless of how big the population is. And it will reduce the size of all populations in the area in which they occur. So density independent factors are mostly abiotic, meaning not living, such as weather changes. So weather does not care whether there's a ton of people or not a lot of people. Human activities such as pollution and natural disasters. Those are all different factors that affect a population no matter what the size of the population is. Okay, so abiotic versus biotic limiting factors. Abiotic factors are non-living things in an ecosystem and may be physical or chemical. Abiotic factors are things that include water, air, nitrogen, oxygen, the different gases in our air, salinity, so how salty the water is, pH, how acidic is the water, different soil nutrients and what the soil is made of, temperature, amount of sun, and precipitation. None of those things are living, but those are things that definitely affect populations. Biotic factors are things that are living, and they include all of the living components of an ecosystem. Examples are bacteria, plants, fungi, animals, anything living. So here's a diagram showing you abiotic components on the left and biotic components on the right. So you start with the sun. This is kind of similar to the diagram that we just went over with the sun and energy flow. It always starts with the sun when we're dealing with ecosystems. Start with the sun, and the sun gives producers the energy they need to live. The consumers, some of them, if they're herbivores, eat the producers. They give off some heat energy. Fungus, heat energy releases at each stage. And then there's these different gases, water, and minerals that serve as nutrients for plants and cycle through and they are abiotic components, but biotic components depend on the abiotic components. So the producers, for example, could not exist without water. So the producers are biotic and they are living. However, they need the abiotic to stay alive. So limiting factors in population change. Any change in an abiotic or a biotic factor may decrease the size of a population if it cannot adapt or migrate from the change. So if there's a big shift in either the abiotic or the biotic, let's say it's abiotic and it's water. If there's a big shift in water and all of a sudden the animals don't have anything to drink, if those animals can't adapt to living without water or they can't migrate and find more water, then the size of the population is going to go down because they're going to die because they don't have water unless they find some. A change may also increase the size of a population if that change enhances its ability to survive, flourish, or reproduce. So let's use the water example again. Let's say that same example. There is a sudden decrease in water. Well, let's say that there is a type of organism that, like a type of lizard, for example, that needs super dry land, that may increase the chances that that lizard would survive and flourish and maybe even reproduce so much that it increases the population size because of the lack of water. That would be a good thing for some populations.